All right, everybody, welcome to the live video for week 2. And in this video, we're going to go through and work with our Hello World file from last week. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of expand on this. We're going to add some more CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, and we're going to kind of give you the full framework for starting your site. And then in the assignments this week, you guys are going to go ahead and add an additional page, add some links, and then you're also going to be doing your writing assignments in this web page that we create today, or that you're going to be creating. But you're going to hand your websites, your writing assignments are going to be kind of part of your HTML work this week. So first and foremost, before we get started, what we want to do is we want to duplicate our week 1 folder. We're going to be using most of the same files from our week 1, most notably the hello world.html. So let's go ahead and duplicate our week 1 folder, and I'm just going to go ahead and call mine week 2. Now that was the duplication in TextMate. If you're using another program, just go ahead and duplicate the folder in your operating system, or you can do it in the terminal as well by using the cp command or copy. So once you have a week 2 created, go ahead and open it up. And depending on what you've done, you may have a test in there. I just have a hello, but go ahead and open up the hello.html. And this should look just like it did when we left it off last week. It should just be a simple hello world in an H1. So if we drag this over here to our browser, we can see that it's just a simple hello world. And you can see the style sheet, or excuse me, the style rule that we added last week is just a simple H1. So this is all well and good, but this isn't really how we want to structure our HTML file. Like I said in the previous video, we want to keep these files separate. So we not only want to logically separate the content and the style in our websites, but we actually physically want to separate them too. So what I'm going to do is in my week 2 directory, I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it CSS. And I'm also going to create a new folder called JavaScript, or actually just JS for short. And what we're going to do is we're going to move some of the code inside of our HTML into files in these folders to kind of separate them out. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to only work on CSS, only work on HTML, or only work on JavaScript. It's going to make it really easy to read our code and our markup because it'll be nicely organized into folders. And this is pretty much the standard on how most websites are organized. Depending on no matter what kind of web programming or web development or design you do, most of the assets for a web page will be organized this way into CSS and JavaScript folders. In fact, you'll most likely even see an image folder, either IMG or images. So once we've done that, we want to go ahead and create files in here. So I want to create a single file in our CSS folder and a single file in our JavaScript folder. And to do that, I'm going to switch back to the terminal. And let me navigate to our folder here and into week 2. All right. So now what I want to do is inside CSS, I want to create a screen.css file. Okay, so now we'll look at that, and you can see that that's been created. And then in my JavaScript folder, I want to touch or create a file called, we'll just call this app.js. And this will hold all of our application level JavaScript. And if we do an ls, we can also see that that's been added. Okay. So now if we switch back over to our web page here, sorry about that, we should see now in our CSS folder a screen.css, and in our JavaScript folder an app.js. So this is a pretty typical layout that you would see in most web applications. So let's go ahead and start here with the screen.css. First and foremost, we want to transfer this rule over there. We don't want this style sheet to be inside of our HTML document. This was fine when we first started, when we were just doing a quick hello world, and this was great for demonstrating kind of how powerful CSS can be. But just imagine if you had an entire website's worth of CSS rules all just in the head of your HTML file. it would be thousands of lines before you even got to the body of the HTML. And that's just not very readable, and it's just not very maintainable when everything is crammed into a single file. So we want to get this out of here. So first, let's go ahead and just copy this rule out, the H1 rule, and then we can just get rid of all of this style altogether. And now if we open up our screen.css, we can paste our H1 rule back in here. Now you could leave it just like this. You actually don't have to change anything. You can leave your CSS all on one line like that. But I like to organize it a little bit differently, and this is fairly standard, is to open up your curly brackets and then indent your properties inside of it to keep things a little more organized. This way, when you go to add more properties, everything is formatted nicely. So for now, let's just leave that font family Helvetica. So save that file. Also, want to point out, make sure you guys are seeing this. This is screen.css. So this is a CSS file, not an HTML file. So make sure that your file is saved appropriately. So let's jump back over to our HTML. And now you can see that we have no style rule in here. So if you saved your file and you come over here and you hit refresh, you'll notice that our font goes back to the Times New Roman default, to the hello world. So what we want to do is we want to get our CSS rules back. We want that to show up in Helvetica, not in Times New Roman. So to get our style sheet back, we have to link the style sheet into the head of our HTML. And we do that with the link tag. Now TextMate, let me just show you that again. If you type link and then hit the tab key, it will autofill all that out for you. And this is one of the benefits to using an editor like this. And TextMate is not alone in code completion. I believe Dreamweaver does it. Some versions of Vim do it. There are lots of popular text editors that do this autocomplete, but it allows you to save on a little bit of typing. So anyway, with the link tag, we want to specifically identify it as a style sheet. So a few things we can get rid of here. We can get rid of this character set. And so a few things we want here. We want the rel property to say style sheet. We want our href property to point to where our CSS file is. And in this case, it's going to be in CSS screen.css. So we don't need that / there. And we can change this to screen. Type text CSS media. We actually want to put screen here. Okay, so that will import our style sheet. So let's recap that again. So we have a link tag with the rel property set to style sheet, the href, which tells this link where our linked where our object is, where the CSS file is, and it's in CSS screen.css. And you can see that if we're in our hello.html file, we want to go into the CSS directory and then find screen.css. So that path is correct. And then our type is text CSS. And there are different types of type that could be text / JavaScript, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But for the meantime, let's just focus on that being text / CSS. And then media is just the media this style sheet is for. And screen is going to be the default for now. This could be projector or print or lots of different things. So we're going to leave that as screen for right now because that's the primary media that we're going to be working with at this point. So now if we save that and we come back over here to our style sheet, or excuse me, to our HTML file and refresh, you'll notice that we have our hello world back. And it's in Helvetica. So you can see that by linking to this style sheet, now anything that we put in our screen.css file will show up. So if I could learn how to spell, and if we add a color to this property, or excuse me, a color property to the CSS rule, and we refresh, you can see now that I've turned that red, and I haven't added one single extra line of code to my HTML page. So this is how we're going to want to structure our CSS and HTML from now on. So you only got one pass for including CSS inside of your HTML, and that was on week 1. From now on, I always want your CSS linked from a separate style sheet, and this is the way to do it every time. So that is how we get CSS into our HTML page. And you can see that by changing our properties of this H1 rule, we can change the way our H1 rule looks on our web page. So feel free to tinker around with this, maybe add some more rules. There are lots of different things you can try out. Here's a border. It's kind of a light border, but we could actually make that a little bit darker. And these here are hex codes for color. We're going to talk about those when we talk about color, but you can, if you want to look those up, I'll put some in the show notes. You can look up the different color hex codes. You can also use color words. There are a defined set of words that CSS allows you to use that are like red, black, blue, purple. Most of the primary colors you can use just by name. So that's CSS. So now we've upgraded our hello world a little bit. We've expanded it. We've given it a little more flexibility. We can start adding CSS rules now without muddying up our markup. So the next thing I want to do is I want to include a JavaScript file. Like we talked about earlier, JavaScript is a language of the web, so we may want to include some JavaScript in our website. And just to kind of show you how that works, I'm going to create a little JavaScript for you, and we're going to insert that into the site, and I'll show you how that works. So just like we linked our style sheet, we can also link JavaScript. And what we do here is use the script tag. So let me show you that again. In TextMate, if you type script and hit tab, you will get a script block that will show up that will allow you to add JavaScript code to it. Now we could use we could just write our JavaScript right here, and that should execute. So if we save that and refresh our browser, you can see that we get an alert when the page loads. So that's all well and good, but we don't really want, just like we don't want our CSS in the head, we don't necessarily want this JavaScript in the head either. Not to mention, we don't really want to be executing that alert every time someone comes to the page. That's called a pop-up, and nobody likes that. So just like we did with our CSS, we can take our JavaScript and move it into app.js. So we will leave that alert inside app.js. And in our hello.html, we can remove this. We still want to keep this script tag, but what we can do is we can come up here and we can add a source attribute or source property. And this source property is just like the href property up here, where we can tell this script, we can tell our HTML page where the source of our script is. So just like we did up top, we'll go JS and then app.js, and we'll save that. And now this script will load when the page loads, just like it did before. And you can see now we've got our hello world that pops up. Or excuse me, our alert that pops up. So we can also do things with JavaScript like make an action happen when we click on a link. So it's kind of awkward to have a pop-up show up every time we go to the page. Maybe we should have that action on a click event. So if we add a link, so we'll make that link go nowhere. And let's see here. Okay. So this is just a text link. If we save that and refresh over here, whoops. All right, so now we have a little link that says click me, and it doesn't actually do anything right now, but we can make it do something by using that JavaScript. So we can give this link an on-click event. And then we can tell this on-click event to do something when you click it. So maybe we want to go alert. Whoops. Click. So let's see what happens when we do that. So we get our hello world alert, and then hopefully when we click this, our click event comes up. So the only problem with this is we've now replaced our alert that we had in the head with an alert that we've put inside of our link in JavaScript. So what if we want this alert to be reused over and over and over again throughout our site? We don't want to have to keep typing alert click, although that's not a whole lot to type. What we can do is, since in our app.js we already have this alert, we can make that a function. And we can put this inside of a function. All right. And if we put that inside of the function, and then we come back to our HTML and we say onClick hello. Now when we refresh this, hopefully we won't get anything on that page load because we put that app.js, we've put that alert inside of a function. But when we click me, we should get the hello world, and we do. So a quick recap. What we did is we took this alert and we put it inside of a function called hello. So now when people click on this link, it triggers the hello function and pops up hello world, just like you see here. So we could create a bunch of different functions in our app.js, all that become available to our HTML file by using this script tag, and then we can use them throughout our page to add interaction. Like I said, these pop-ups aren't the best form of interaction, and they're not really a great tool to use unless you're really careful on a production website, but this does give you a good idea of just how CSS, JavaScript, and HTML all come together into the browser to kind of form our web experience. And these are the three core languages that we're going to be working with throughout the semester. So at this point, I'm going to send you guys loose on your assignment this week. You're going to be adding another page to our little week 2 website. You're going to be tweaking a little bit of the CSS and JavaScript we did. And then you're also going to be putting your writing assignments in the website this week. So you can read all that below in the assignments. So if you have any questions, like always, feel free to send me an email or schedule some office hours. So I will talk to you guys soon.